Larry Bird built his entire career on always having the final word. He talked through championships, through playoff wars, through double teams, and through some of the greatest moments the NBA has ever seen. Opponents feared his jumper, but they also feared his voice. Bird once told defenders exactly where he planned to shoot from before draining the basket anyway. He mocked opponents, challenged superstars, and backed up every sentence with results. Even Michael Jordan once admitted Bird's confidence could break a team mentally before tip-off. That is why what happened recently stunned basketball fans across generations. For the first time in decades, Larry Bird reportedly had no response. Not because someone insulted him. Not because someone challenged his legacy. But because Michael Jordan delivered a message so personal and so deeply respectful that the man famous for talking suddenly went quiet. People expecting another endless, greatest of all time argument were caught completely off guard. This was not about rings, statistics, or highlight reels. Jordan reportedly spoke about Bird as the player who helped redefine professionalism, competitiveness, and mental toughness for an entire era of basketball. According to those close to the event, Jordan described Bird as one of the few athletes who forced him to elevate every part of his own game before he ever won championships in Chicago. That landed heavily across the sports world because fans are used to hearing legends defend themselves, compare eras, and protect their status. Instead, Jordan reportedly chose admiration over ego. Analysts later described a moment as two icons finally acknowledging that greatness does not diminish another legend's legacy, it strengthens it. And then, thousands of miles away in Paris, another emotional sports moment unfolded that nobody inside Roland Garros was prepared to witness. The French Open has welcomed movie stars, presidents, musicians, and royalty over the years. Opera singers have performed there. International celebrities have appeared in the crowd. But even longtime tournament officials admitted they had never seen anything quite like what happened when Regine Velasquez arrived at Court Suzanne Lenglen. For millions across Asia, Velasquez is more than a singer. She is known as the Asia's songbird, a performer whose voice defined an entire generation of Filipino music fans. She sold out theaters around the world, performed at major international venues like Carnegie Hall, and became one of the most recognizable entertainers in Southeast Asia long before social media made global fame easier to achieve. Yet on this afternoon in Paris, the 56-year-old icon was not there for a concert. She was there for a 21-year-old tennis player who had just suffered one of the toughest defeats of her young career. Alex Ila had lost in the first round at Roland Garros. The scoreboard showed elimination. The tournament moved on quickly, as it always does. But Filipino fans inside the stadium refused to leave quietly. Flags still waved. Chants of Laban Alex continued echoing around the court long after the match ended. Then something extraordinary happened. Witnesses say Velasquez quietly walked onto Court Suzanne Lenglen holding a microphone as tournament staff looked visibly surprised. At first, many fans thought it was a standard post-match ceremony or announcement. Then she began to sing. The stadium immediately fell silent. Not because people were confused. Because people recognized the voice instantly. French spectators who did not understand the lyrics reportedly still became emotional simply from the sound filling the stadium. Filipino fans openly cried in the stands. Television cameras captured supporters holding flags against their faces while others sang along softly through tears. What made the moment so powerful was the timing. This was not a celebration after a championship victory. This was not a trophy presentation. A legendary singer chose to honor a young athlete immediately after public heartbreak, reminding everyone inside the stadium that impact is not measured only by winning. Sports commentators later called it one of the most emotional non-tennis moments Roland Garros had witnessed in years. And perhaps that explains why the footage spread so quickly online afterward. Because in a single week, fans saw two rare things happen in sports. One legend publicly honoring another without ego, and thousands of people standing to celebrate a defeated athlete as if she had won the tournament anyway. Moments like that stay with the television cameras never stop rolling because nobody inside Court Suzanne Lenglen realized they were about to capture one of the most emotional moments of the entire French Open. Every angle mattered. Every reaction mattered. And right there in the middle of it all sat Alex Ila completely frozen, her hand pressed tightly against her chest as if she was trying to steady her breathing. This was the same young woman who had stood across the net from world number 2 Elena Rybakina in Rome without showing fear. The same player who carried the expectations of millions of Filipinos every time she stepped onto a major court. The same athlete who had become one of the emotional stories of Roland Garros despite exiting early. Yet in this moment, she looked overwhelmed. Paris, France. May 27, 2026. 4:47 p.m. Court Suzanne Lenglen. And suddenly the entire stadium shifted its attention away from the match itself. To understand why the atmosphere became so emotional, you have to understand where Ila's head was that afternoon. Her French Open singles run had already ended less than 24 hours earlier after a painful first-round loss to Eva Jovic. The defeat still lingered heavily around her team. Every athlete knows the feeling after a major tournament loss, the endless replay of missed opportunities, the mental review of points that could have changed everything. The Philippine flags that had flooded Court 14 during her match were slowly disappearing from Paris. Fans who had traveled across Europe to support her were checking out of hotels and boarding trains home. The chants of Laban Alex that once shook the grounds of Roland Garros had faded into scattered echoes around the complex. Ila reportedly came to Court Suzanne Lenglen that afternoon for one simple reason: to remember why she loved tennis. No cameras were supposed to follow her. No headlines were expected. She wanted to sit quietly, watch matches like a normal fan, and reset emotionally before returning to Mallorca for training. According to people near her camp, she wore casual clothing specifically to avoid attention around the grounds. But by then, avoiding attention had become impossible. Even sitting in the player's box, spectators immediately recognized her. Fans began whispering. Phones slowly came out. Some supporters noticed Filipino flags reappearing in the crowd simply because Ila had entered the stadium. It was becoming increasingly clear that she could no longer move anonymously through major tournaments. Then came the moment nobody anticipated. Court Suzanne Lenglen was already packed for a second-round showdown between two rising stars. The energy inside the stadium felt lively but routine by Grand Slam standards. Spectators settled into their seats. Ball kids moved into position. Broadcasters prepared for another afternoon of tennis. Ila sat quietly beside her mother, Riza Ila, while her coaching team occupied seats a few rows behind them. Witnesses later described her demeanor as calm, but emotionally drained. She applauded politely during warm-ups, occasionally smiled at nearby fans. Mostly, she stayed quiet. And then the stadium announcer suddenly paused the pre-match routine. At first, people thought it was a technical issue. Then music began playing softly through the speakers. The cameras immediately cut toward Ila because staff members near the court had already turned to look in her direction. Her expression reportedly changed instantly from relaxed curiosity to complete disbelief. That reaction became the center of the viral footage later viewed millions of times online. Because whatever she was hearing, she clearly did not expect it. Fans close to the players' section could be seen covering their mouths in shock. Others stood up before anything was officially explained. Broadcasters themselves sounded confused for several seconds, trying to understand what was unfolding in real time. And right in the middle of it all sat Alex Ila, motionless, one hand pressed against her heart as the entire atmosphere inside Suzanne Lenglen transformed from an ordinary tennis afternoon into something deeply personal. What happened next would become one of the defining emotional images of Roland Garros 2026. Not because of a championship point, not because of a historic upset, but because a defeated 21-year-old athlete discovered that sometimes people continue celebrating you long after the scoreboard says your tournament is over.